testimony of the guard. And it's a changeover. You know what? No, it's there, but I don't know about, and he even kind of talks about on the Rio Rancho stuff, oh, I don't know if I have it or not. It's not the kind of question you can call and ask. Hey, do I have life insurance on my wife, and is suicide covered? But you can look it up, and then you can go make sure you got it. And there's that kind of like, oh, he didn't have a car, but the truck's been gone for a month. We've had caddies bought just days after Tara's death. And obviously divorce is no longer an issue anymore. And the money that goes into it. And you heard about the money having to pay Rio Rancho. And then there's Nick Wheeler. Defendant tells you, didn't have a clue. But he does tell you Mom had heard rumors. And he explains his version of the whole "you saved my life" to Andrea Lucero when asking. Andrea Lucero told you what she heard. An awful strange thing to say. And he was really surprised because, my God, Tara was obsessed with him. Because it was all about him. You heard, you saw. What he wanted went. Pack up and leave. Not dealing with this. She's obsessed with me. I'm going to have all these affairs. And finally, he's got to shut her up. Once again, it's not about a truck theft. But the fact that Tara says that he's involved in a fraud. And he knows that is a problem. Because if she's saying that, what happens when APD hears that he's involved in some kind of a truck fraud? Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. What? One of our officers is involved in some kind of a fraud? Okay, we got to look into that. He just transferred there. He tells you, oh, probation, that means they can get rid of you. You hear everyone else, oh, but I wasn't really on probation then. He kind of catches himself. I was, because it was a lateral, I was, they could just send me back. Credibility, you judge. And let's look at the credibility of the defendant. Let's look at what he says versus what he does. Just a few places, because we all know actions speak louder than words. Says he never took the laptop with him to work. Does admit to looking up foreign military sites, APD union information. You heard from Brookerson. We went through that date. Yeah, the phone records show that based on these things being looked up, he'd be in Albuquerque. But he never took it with him. Can he delete? He says, I don't know how to delete temporary internet files. But he does know how to search a computer, how to find all sorts of things, all of which were deleted. Remember, Brookerson talks about all these things we're looking at were the items that were deleted. He does testify under oath in the civil case when asked if he cleared the internet history on the APD computer, not on the home computer, but asked specifically about clearing internet history. I don't remember now. I don't know. I don't even know how to do that, as he comes in here and tells you guys. I just don't remember if I did it or not. He says he looked up how to kill and how to rip out someone's throat in regards to some type of martial arts. No evidence he ever enrolls in some kind of martial arts or follows through on the computer looking for a particular type of martial arts. his phones. Oh, he tells us he had that different number because of a prank call. Doesn't know what happened to the phone. And then that phone that would have been right at this time, which we never have, oh, it had to get sent back because of some defect, even though there's no record of that. And he has an explanation for everything. Now remember, he's the only witness who saw, heard, read, and was present for every piece of evidence presented over the last 5 weeks. And now he has an explanation for every possible inconsistency. But you have to determine if what he tells you is credible. Remember, bias, interest, manner while testifying, reasonableness in light of all of the evidence. And which story do we look at? Just one piece. Testifying for his jury on 7/10/13, when I was an aviation policeman, she shot that gun. And then he goes on multiple times to talk to you about how Tara never shot this gun. It was only the aviation gun. At the deposition on 3/11/09, actually I don't remember if she shot that gun or the one from aviation police. And at the scene, Tara's death, on 10/21/07, when he's talking to law enforcement, when asked about the gun at the scene, yes, that's my fucking, I showed her how to fucking use that gun. But, you know, he's a changed man, ladies and gentlemen. After this, he's a changed man. You've heard about the women and when they come in and how they play out. Oh, Rose, what's going on? And hey, Tara found out about it, but I still kept having an affair with her for months. Regina Sanchez, Tara busted. You know, oh, but I didn't go back and look at the phone records. How often he's calling Deborah after the death. And obviously everything about Heather. But he's a changed man. He's changed for his jury. Because this is not suicide. It's not. It doesn't add up. This is murder. The defendant did kill Tara Chavez with the deliberate intent to take away her life. When he walked her to that house, he shoved that gun into her throat, and he pulled that trigger. He put a bullet in the back of her brain so he could move on. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as a perfect murder. Even that thin blue line cracks, and people begin to realize that something's wrong. Because common sense tells you this is not a suicide. Defendant killed Tara Chavez. Thank you.
start, it's your call, you want to start in 10 minutes and break for this, or you probably don't have a break anyhow.
Oh, in other words, if I start after lunch, we're gonna be broken up anyway.
Yes.
Well, I don't want two breaks, so.
I would prefer to start it in about 10 minutes.
That's fine.
Break for lunch.
That's okay, Judge, I'll do it.
Why don't we plan it that way, okay?
Sure.
All right, okay. We'll be for 10 minutes.
All right.
Who's he?
Mr. Sterling, are you going to need the Elmo?
Yes.
I'm going to start it up so this
Good.
way it doesn't have that purple.
Thank you.
Hey, Carl, you want to hit the document camera for me?
What do I don't know what it is.
Oh, I'll do it.
Do I have to do something up
Yeah,
there?
you you know that box that's to the
Yeah.
left there? That little box, a small box right there. Just tap it and the menu will come on and it says document counter.
What do you think?
Good. I just didn't, I wasn't afraid it was gonna be showing purple again.
Right.
So I thought I warmed it up.
Well, it was one of those things where, yeah, it like needs to warm and then.
Yeah, and it doesn't, it's not like that all the time, but.
Why don't you, I'll sit in here, why don't you?
I was just gonna give you a phone call. Alright. Thank you.
I think of all of us, you put in the most time on this case, maybe with the exception of Arlene. Yeah. Right.
I don't even know if I'm gonna use the Elmo to tell you the truth, but.
I turned it on just so you look on that purple,
Yeah.
so.
Okay,
before
thanks.
that, okay?
That's fine.
And I don't know if you're gonna do meetings and photos.
I don't know either.
Okay.
Just gonna turn that up, yeah. All right,
Well, I don't want it too much, how about like that?
however you like.
Okay.
Like I could just never see. Like I say, like you have to pull that back.
Nah, no, I think, the only thing I'm gonna probably grab is the gun and where's the magazine? It's in a separate one? Everything's in?
Do you want gloves or?
I don't want gloves. Do I have to have gloves?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do gloves, I want gloves.
Okay, you're
Screw
gonna.
gloves.
I was gonna say.
Well,
Say,
that would've been
please,
entertaining.
please, not at the end of all of this. Down, let defense attorney.
Claudia would have been stepping up to the plate.
She would have, and she could have done a good job too. And Patty too.
That's right, yeah.
I too want to thank you for your time and your service to our state and to our country, because being on a jury is one of the most noble and important functions that anything in our government can deal with. Because you are citizens, ordinary, everyday citizens that are here to decide the fate in a very important case of another ordinary citizen. Before I go any further, my daughters have asked me, and they're right, to apologize for mixing up people's names during the course of this case. It's a serious matter, and I am very sorry for mixing up people's names. The reason my daughters brought it up, I've got 3 kids, they're all girls, and for all their lives I've never gotten their names right once. Okay, let me touch on a couple of quick matters. When we picked you all for the jury and we sat down and we talked to you, I mentioned a concern that I had, and some of it kind of came up in the questionnaires, but that seems like in today's society, criminal trials, which have turned into a form of popular entertainment, sometimes talk about justice, and we talked about how there's, you know, justice for terror. Well, in this case, this is State of New Mexico versus Levi Chavez. The case that's going to talk about justice for terror, you've learned about, you've heard about throughout this trial. That is the case entitled Estate of Terra Chavez versus Levi Chavez. That case is on hold, as you have heard. So that's where you're going to, that jury is going to be concerned about justice for terror. I don't want you at all to get the slightest impression that I am thinking that the loss of the life of this young mother of 2 kids is not very, very important and should not be given the utmost importance by you, because it should. But what a criminal case is about whether or not the state can prove what they allege beyond a reasonable doubt. And so what a criminal case is about, if we're talking about a search for truth, because that's often happened too. And you know, I didn't really get the DA's thing during jury selection where there was a puzzle pieces and then you take them off one at a time and at the end there's the word truth. It'll probably be explained better than it was in jury selection, but I don't get it. Are they saying that Levi was covering up the truth and then we pull it off and then there's the truth? I don't know. Anyway, in a search for truth, the only truth in a criminal case that you're searching for is, are the allegations against him true or are they not? And the reason I'm saying that, and we talked about this during jury selection, is that sometimes you don't get to find out everything that you want to know during the course of a criminal case. A criminal case is not an investigation where if you're unable to decide exactly what happened, then you've done a bad job. No, a criminal case is not an investigation where you have to find everything out. The only thing you have to find out is, can they prove their case or can they not? Now, we talked a lot during jury selection about burden of proof and that the state has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? And so you look at the state's evidence, and these are sort of gradations that I've come up with of, you know, I believe him not guilty, or it's highly unlikely that he's guilty, or, well, less than likely that he's guilty, probably didn't do it, unlikely, possibly not guilty, may not be guilty, perhaps not guilty, I suspect him. None of those are proof beyond a reasonable doubt. possibly guilty, probably guilty, likely guilty. Even strong, firm belief in guilt is not guilt if you have to stop and say to yourself, well, wait a minute, what if it was suicide? Because if you have to stop and ask yourself, wait a minute, what if it was suicide? That means you have a doubt. And that means you have a reasonable doubt. And that means that the state has to go beyond that, even if it's a strong, firm belief in guilt. And why is the state's burden so high? We talked about that. We talked about the Founding Fathers. We talked about the concept that I believe all of you on the jury accepted, that the burden of proof has to be high so that guilty people don't get punished. Because we could catch the 10 guilty guys and make sure they're all convicted. Remember the concept of it's better to let 10 guilty people go free than to imprison an innocent man? So, if we set the burden of proof real low, somewhere in here, like probably, you know, then we'd get all the 10 guilty guys, but we'd get the innocent guy too, and he'd have to do time. And if we make it so high, like we have made in this country for over 200 years, that is to ensure that if there's an innocent man, he doesn't get punished. And that if it's too high so that the state can't quite prove somebody that's guilty, well then so be it, but we don't want to punish the guilty man. That's why the high burden of proof exists. Because you know what? In a civil case, like the one that the Cordovas have brought against Levi, they can, right here, probably. If it's 51% he did it and 49% he didn't, Levi loses. That's how a civil case works. And the burden of proof is even lower for other things. There's standards called clear and convincing evidence, substantial evidence, whatever, depending on what kind of a case it is. For example, if you want to terminate a mother's rights to her child, you don't even have to show probably. It's down here somewhere. But the law for over 200 years has said this is what it's going to take before we're going to condemn a man for murder one. That's what it's going to take. And I'm here to talk to you about it. And I'm here to talk to you about everything that Mr. McKay said. Everything. This is an investigation, as you know, because you've listened through all of this, that started on about October 23rd or 24th. Because you'll remember that Aaron Jones saw no red flags when he was there that first night, not until after he went and talked to Joseph Cordova. And we will talk about the combustion that occurred when the two of those got together and how it continued to roll. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But this case, as you know, because you've heard witnesses and you've heard the various lawyers say, well, you remember you gave this statement back in February of 07? Or you remember, October of 07? Or do you remember you gave this statement in May of 08? Or do you remember that you examined this thing in 09? And it went on and on and on. Some of the witnesses, like Art Ortiz, that the state hired, did his report, I think, in May. And remember, we started picking you in June. So that means that Levi has been investigated in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. A non-stop investigation of Levi Chavez, non-stop television reports with packs of lies that we're going to talk about, that even during jury selection the DA's office admitted a lot of those were lies. They've backed off some of them, others they haven't, but I'm going to show you their lies. He was investigated for all that time. It took 4 years of solid investigation before they even brought charges against him. And then it's been 2 years now, today, since they brought charges against him. And this case was investigated by the Valencia County Sheriff's Department, the New Mexico State Police, the New Mexico Insurance Fraud Bureau, the Albuquerque Police Department Internal Affairs, the FBI, the civil lawyer and his law firm hired by the Cordovas, and investigators retained by the District Attorney's Office. So in 7 calendar years, you are seeing 7 different law enforcement agencies. What you just heard Mr. McKay say is what they've come up with. And they have been able to cobble together a semi-believable, made-up story. You know, it's very important that you consider these instructions. The law presumes the defendant to be innocent unless or until you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt of his guilt. That means that the state has to eradicate any guilt, that any doubt at all about his guilt that is reasonable. And now obviously you folks aren't going to stop and say, wait, what if it was committed by his evil twin from Mars? No, you're not going to do that, because that would be unreasonable. So if you have to say, wait a minute, then that means that you're basing it on reason and common sense. And we too, just like the state, want you to use all of your reason and common sense. The burden is always on the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not required that the state prove guilt beyond all possible doubt. Okay, and of course I agree with that statement. The state doesn't have to prove beyond what is possible. The state doesn't have to prove guilt beyond infinity. The state is not required to prove guilt beyond all possible doubt. No, not beyond infinity. But the test is one of reasonable doubt, and a reasonable doubt is the kind of doubt based on reason and common sense, the kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate to act in the graver and more important affairs of life. So unless you're willing to just go in there and say, yep, I accept it, lock, stock, and barrel, then that means you have to stop and hesitate and say, wait. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to review the evidence thoroughly and carefully. If you want to go through all of this stuff, we encourage you to go through all of it, every bit of it. Because the more you look at it and the deeper you dig, the more you're going to see that it supports Levi's story. And the more you're going to say, where's the proof beyond the reasonable doubt? I have to tell you that Levi Chavez, when he got charged, he said, you know, I don't have to cooperate in this investigation. That's what he could have said. And when he was charged, he said, you know what, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. The state has the burden. I can just sit back and make them prove it. Well, what Levi said is that I am going to take this to trial, and I am going to make them prove it, because I'm an innocent man. And so, in addition to making them prove it, I'm going to present my own defense to defend myself against these allegations, because I'm an innocent man. And I'm going to get up on the witness stand and I'm going to testify so that the jury can see that I am willing to answer any questions that the prosecution wants to ask me, and I'm willing to let the jury size me up and see what they think of me, and I'm willing to tell, and I'm eager to tell that jury what happened. And so he did. Now, I first want to talk about some of the witnesses. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll go more deeply into the case. But you have to stop, and you have to hesitate, and you have to go slow, and you have to proceed with caution so that you can arrive at the proper verdict, so that you don't wait until a month from now while you're tossing and turning in bed and saying, uh-oh, what if he was innocent? What if it was suicide? No, now's the time to do it. When you go and return for the first time to deliberate, but return to the jury room. Okay, witnesses. Now, this isn't going to necessarily be in any kind of a linear order, but I want you to go with me through this. I think I'd like to start talking about some of the lay witnesses first, meaning non-cop, non-expert. A couple of Tara's best friends, Melanie Gonzalez and Andrea Lucero. Both of them told you they talked to Tara and texted Tara 2-3 times a day, up to several times a day. They knew what was going on with her. They would see her in person nearly every day. Now, I want to be very tactful when I say that when you look at the phone records, you're going to see that Tara wasn't in contact with her parents. The last time she was in contact with her parents was several days before her death. When she's on the phone non-stop making hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, people she doesn't call are her family. And you're going to see that in the records. And you're going to ask yourself, does the family really know what was going on in her life? Remember, no members of the family ever read the text she sent. No members of the family, got up here and told you, no members of the family had ever read her diary until after she was dead. But let's talk about Melanie Gonzalez and Andrea Lucero. So Melanie says that Tara was sad, lonely. She said, this hurts. She was really down. Those were all things she said from the witness stand. She also said that Levi never knew about Tara's affair. Okay, so that's the first one of the state's witnesses who goes contrary to one of the state's. You know, the state has to have 5 different theories and let you kind of pick from them like a smorgasbord, I guess, of why Levi would kill the mother of his children. But Melanie Gonzalez tells you that Tara was sad, lonely, hurt, and really down, that Levi never knew about the affairs, and, interestingly, Melanie Gonzalez was told about the car theft by Tara, but Melanie Gonzalez was never told that it was supposedly a fake car theft. No, Rose Slama's the only one of those that came up here to tell you that. Other thing about Melanie Gonzalez was she pointed out that both Nick and Samantha Wheeler were pumping her for information about the case. What do the police know? What do the police have? Calling her at all kinds of odd hours of the night, calling them non-stop, bugging them for information about the case, to the point where Melanie Gonzalez finally had to cut the Wheelers off because they were bugging her so much. She was so offended that they would care so much about what the police had instead of, you know, the issue at hand, like a dead friend. The reason I mention that is not because I want you to conclude that Nick and or Samantha Wheeler killed Tara, but I want to contrast the involvement of Nick Wheeler in this case to the involvement of Levi in this case, and then the unbelievable scorched earth investigation of Levi Chavez compared to zip for Nick Wheeler. Because that tells you that this was not an objective police investigation. Levi was targeted from the very night that Aaron Jones and Joseph Cordova met and talked. And he was the one and only target, to the exclusion of evidence to the contrary, to the exclusion of evidence of suicide, to the exclusion of even investigating somebody else who had more involvement. So we're going to get into Nick and Samantha later. Andrea Lucero, she told you that Tara kept things bottled up, and we know that. She told you that Tara was not afraid of Levi. She told you that that weekend, the weekend that Levi was out of town and Tara was reaching the zenith of her suicidal pain, said that that weekend Tara and she went to get groceries and went to rent movies because Tara was expecting a weekend with Levi, or she told Andrea she was expecting a weekend with Levi. They were going to hang out, according to Andrea Lucero, that weekend. They were, and you heard it from the witness stand, they were going to get together and try and work on her marriage, or so poor Tara thought. Also, Andrea told you that Tara was hurt, very hurt, as it became apparent to her right at the end, and we'll show you how close to the end, because Nick Wheeler was the last person to talk to Tara. She was hurt that her affair with Nick was not going to blossom, and it only increased geometrically. She just it became so much that she had to get rid of the pain, and we're going to talk about Dr. Berman. Another funny thing is Andrea said that yeah, she knew from Tara about the truck being stolen, but she was never ever told about a supposed fake theft. Now that's only Roslama. Remember, Andrea, one of her very best friends that talked to her several times a day. When Aaron Jones asked Andrea, you'll remember this testimony, can you think of anyone who might possibly want to kill Tara? Andrea, Tara's best friend, said Samantha Wheeler, without dropping a beat. Didn't say Levi. After Tara died, Levi begged her, please tell me if Tara was having an affair. Now that she's died, there's this investigation, and it's come up, and I've heard that Tara was having an affair. Please tell me. I don't want to have to hear it from some cop I don't even know. If you know, I'm begging you. And eventually, Andrea told you she told it. And he said, actually Andrea's recollection was, he said, thank you, you saved my ass. I corrected her and said, didn't you say earlier, he said, thank you, you saved my life. Levi recalled it as something like, I'll be wondering about it for the rest of my life. But you know what? Thank you, you saved my life. What is so weird about that? I think I just heard Mr. McKay say that was very strange. If you're Levi, and you've already had to go through the shock and horror a life-changing experience, making fun of him that he's not going to be a changed man after he walks in and finds his wife dead because of his philandering ways. That's not a life-changing experience. That's something to snicker about. No, it's not. No, it's not. So, thank you, you saved my life. Yeah, because otherwise he would be tortured for the rest of his life, wondering, A, did Tara really have an affair, and B, who was it with? Now, is Levi a little bit self-centered? Wondering about Tara's affairs when you know what kind of sleep-around guy he was? You may conclude that. He's not on trial for being self-centered. If he were, would just plead guilty. But that's what was in his heart, and that's what was going on. And he was particularly vulnerable because he had gone through a horror that, God forbid, none of us ever have to go through. And on the heels of that, he learns about his wife, and he is in this vulnerable place. You get the picture. You know what Levi is. Levi is a shy, kind of reserved guy, occasionally cocky a little bit, usually pretty funny and fun to be with. People enjoy his company, but he just was in that place where learning about his wife was something that he needed to do at that moment. None of us will probably understand how we would behave and how we would react on the heels of that kind of experience that he experienced around 9 p.m. October 21st, 2007. Gina Cordova. She's married to one of the Cordova brothers. She told you. Tara was sometimes happy, sometimes sad. Sometimes their marriage was going good. Sometimes their marriage was going bad. And in particular, I'm going to ask you to recall the testimony of Gina Cordova that Tara's, and I said it, but she agreed with me, that Tara's self-esteem came from being married to Levi. And she was happy to be married to a police officer, and that her identity was tied up in being married to Levi. Being married to a police officer, having a husband, having children, not having to ask the parents for money because she and Levi were doing their damnedest to make it on their own, to show the Cordova family that they could do so. And why did they need to show the Cordova family? We'll get into that later, too. Gina Cordova, even though she is a Cordova, told you that Tara was not afraid of Levi, and she was not afraid of Levi. She went over to Levi's house to ask him what happened. And they went to the back and they sat down together, and Levi told her what happened. And Levi's story has never changed one bit, not one iota. Levi may be one of the few people in this entire case whose story has never changed, okay? Now, the state wants you to think about, I wasn't sure if it was the aviation police Glock 17 9mm or it was the APD Glock 17 9mm, or that when he came, the night of the thing, he told Jones, yeah, I taught her how to use that effing gun. Well, that effing gun was a Glock 17 9mm. Are you going to be holding a man who just walked in and found his wife dead in the most gruesome of circumstances? Are you going to hold him to precise grammatical phrasing? He meant that gun meaning Glock 17 9mm. Hell, some of you guys in jury selection said, yeah, I've shot that gun. Did you mean this gun, or did you mean Glock 17 9mm, that gun? He meant she knew how to shoot a Glock 17 9mm. Is that so hard to accept? Is that very strange, like the prosecution wants you to believe? I want to talk, I guess, next, see how are we going to do this. I might want to talk about Aaron Jones next, but I have to put it in the context of what he said to all of these witnesses. But before I do that, let's get into that contrast. Before I get into Jones and who he investigated and who he didn't, let's get into the contrast between Nick and Samantha and Levi. Okay? Levi wrote out consents to search, said, sure, you can search my home. Here's my phone. Take it. Download it. Here's my computer. Take it. Download it. Here, I'll give you some DNA. No, you don't need to get a search warrant. Here's some DNA. There's my fingerprints. He gave statements to Aaron Jones, was read his rights and talked that night. Came back again. Came back again. I believe he came back a third time, but so whether it was 2 or 3 times, he never lawyered up. He came in and talked to the guy. He said, you know, after, I think about the 3rd visit, after Aaron Jones asked him what happened, he told him what happened. And he never used the word suicide, not once. And we're going to get into some of that about the 911 calls, because if Levi wanted to, was so intent on making this look like a suicide, but it was really a murder, why wouldn't Levi start from the very beginning? Why wouldn't he do like a guilty person would do and start saying on the 911 call, oh, I was with somewhere else with another woman and then she committed suicide and blah, blah, blah. No, he didn't do that. He said, my wife just shot herself in the head. He said she was dead. And he said, send the 34s now. I need them now, please. Now, please, hurry, send somebody. And he told you that in Albuquerque, when you tell the 911 operator that you got a dead person just shot in the head, that they send everybody, and that when you say 34s, you're getting the fire and rescue, Albuquerque ambulance, the police department, the major crime scene van unit, everything. Because they send out the cavalry when somebody calls up and says somebody just got shot in the head. And that's what Levi was expecting, and you heard the urgency in his voice. And it's crazy, crazy to say that, okay, well, he's guilty because he didn't perform CPR. You saw the photographs. That's how he found his wife. You saw the torture that he had to go through when he was on the witness stand describing that it was black, and by the way, not red, black. And he said it was like spackling. And he said, come on, you've seen those photographs. I'm a police officer, what? You want me to do CPR on a cold, dead, stiff Tara? He said he couldn't bear to look at her. Remember, he was on his knees, crying and saying, why? But he wouldn't look up at her face. Because part of the torture and part of the horror, probably as big or even bigger when it's interconnected with finding your wife dead there, is knowing that for years she's been saying, Levi, Levi, I am nothing without you. Levi, don't leave me. I'm going to kill myself. And he never believed it. He thought it was one of her threats, one of her ways to lure him back. And she had many different ways of luring him back. And if you want to read through all of this stuff, because some of it I didn't bring up in trial, but it's in here. You're going to find out about the other ways she tried to tantalize him back. She tried lots of different things. She was a desperate wife. And a lot of her desperation did have to do with Levi. These people were just a couple that were in love, but were a very, very bad match. And it was very bad and toxic mentally and spiritually for them, and you all know that from this. But as I was saying, part of the real torture is him knowing that she had sent him these texts, and she had left him voicemails that he didn't even listen to. And we're going to talk, by the way, I can't believe, but maybe I can, now the DA's office is adopting Aaron Jones' argument about that he conveniently only saved one text. Well, we're going to prove that's a lie. That's just one of Aaron Jones' lies, and we're going to prove it to you in a minute here. So, Levi does all of those things without a lawyer. He also at the scene says, swab me for gunshot residue. Well, we all learned later from the OMI lady that gunshot residue tests aren't commonly done anymore. But Aaron Jones thought they were, and Aaron Jones made sure that Tara's hands were bagged up with the OMI person, and they went off to OMI because, he thought, well, it was a suicide, and this way we'll see if there's gunshot residue here. I'm glad he bagged the hands, because there's no chipped or broken fingernails. There's long fingernails with nothing in them, no sign of resistance whatsoever, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Levi was naively thinking that yes, it would be over in a week, because he knew he was innocent, and he knew that the facts were the facts, and he was thinking that Aaron Jones, like he told you on the witness stand, at the time he thought Aaron Jones was legit. Now, remember Nick Wheeler testifying? Nick Wheeler's the guy that's the buddy of Aaron Jones. Nick Wheeler's the guy that, believe it or not, I mean, this is mind-blowing, while Aaron Jones is conducting his initial interviews of Levi Chavez, Nick Wheeler's calling him on the phone, calling him on his cell phone, because they're buddies and they even got their phones, cell phones programmed into each other's phone. He's calling him on the phone, asking him, you're working on that Tara Chavez investigation, and while Jones is talking to Levi. So, after all of that, and after all the bugging and pumping for information, and Aaron Jones told you how Nick Wheeler and Samantha Wheeler were constantly calling him and pumping him for information nonstop. And Aaron Jones told you, Nick Wheeler's his buddy. Nick Wheeler was even a witness for him on one of the lawsuits, or on the witness list. You got pictures of him and Nick Wheeler, Aaron Jones does, in his office, or he did, back when he had an office, before he thought that his computers were being taken over and he had to move to his house. But we'll talk more about that later. So, Nick Wheeler, no search done of the house, no phones taken, no downloads of them, no computers taken, no downloads of them, no DNA taken. And that's interesting, because there was an unidentified male hair found. And yeah, I think I might have said Levi was excluded. I thought he was excluded. But he could have been excluded, because the DNA lady told you that because this hair didn't have enough of a bulb, or whatever she called it at the end, they couldn't get enough to do a DNA profile with the type of DNA testing, the polymerase chain reaction amplification, whatever. They couldn't get DNA profile from their lab. But she also told you that she was very aware that there were other labs that tested for mitochondrial DNA. And they just let that hair sit there for 4+ years because they want to convict Levi Chavez. They don't want to test that hair because then if they test that hair, they're going to have less of a case than they have now, and gosh knows they've done their best to try to cobble together something to come into court with. Okay, so Nick didn't have to turn over his set of fingerprints, of course. He, remember this, Levi gave statement after statement after statement, never lawyered up. Nick Wheeler, first statement he gives it with Samantha present. Remember when Aaron Jones talked about the Reed method of police interviewing and police interrogation and agreed with me that, gee, you're supposed to separate the people when you're trying to take statements and you're trying to find out what happened. That's what an investigation is. It's when you're trying to find out what happened. It's not what Aaron Jones did. Aaron Jones wasn't ever trying to find out what happened. Aaron Jones was trying to beat the story of Levi's guilty into everybody he interviewed, and we're going to talk more about that later. But anyhow, the first statement Nick Wheeler gives, husband and wife together. It makes common sense. If you want to know the truth, you want them to get their story straight by being together? No, I mean with anybody. I'm not necessarily talking about the Wheelers now. I'm just talking about what makes common sense to us lay people. That would be good investigative thinking. Second statement Aaron Jones gives, takes from Nick Wheeler, happens in a lawyer's office. Nick Wheeler, when Aaron Jones calls him for the second statement, sorry, bud, it's going to have to go through the attorney. So Nick Wheeler's lawyered up. But does Nick Wheeler ever get investigated? No. Now, I'm going to see how much time we got before I decide which witness to go into next. Okay. Remember Jeanne Moreau? Jeanne Moreau was the lady that was the flight attendant. Jeanne Moreau was the lady that had been a police officer in Houston, and she saw a bunch of police coming and a bunch and saw the hubbub, and having been a police officer, she figured, uh-oh, first thought was maybe somebody's dead. And she gets out, I think water and soft drinks or whatever she gets out. She opens her garage door, lays those things out there for the officers, goes and tells the officers, hey guys, you can use my restroom if you want. You can go through you can go through my garage, and right here outside in my garage I've got stuff for you to drink if you guys need it. And by the way, when I say talk to the police officers letting them use the restroom, that's before the Albuquerque Police Department officers showed up. We're talking about when the actual investigators from Valencia County showed up. Okay, so this is Jeanne Moreau. Remember, she and her husband had video cameras, and at the time that the police finally came to talk to her, she had first been talked to by the Cordovas, and then by the time the police finally come and talk to her, her husband has readjusted the video cameras so that they're on the property and don't go onto the street. And remember that they used to be on the street, including back when this all happened. And that because they were motion sensitive, or whatever you call it, they start working when the cameras see movement, having them point to the street was wasting up a whole lot of recording space, because every time a car would go by, it'd go on. And so the Moros would rather have it right focused on their property, so it only goes on when somebody goes onto their property. But back then, you heard that she and her husband watched videos for hours and hours and hours during the applicable time period. There was never any seeing of Levi, but remember when, I'm doing this for illustration, remember when she got up on the witness stand and said, yeah, I saw Levi Chavez, and I saw him on Saturday the 20th of October 2007. Wow, that would have been a powerful witness. That would have blown Levi's alibi, a word that he has never used, but that would have blown Levi's alibi, because Levi knows and Deborah Romero knows that they were together on the 20th. So she gets up on the witness stand and she says that. And then I ask her, I say, hey, you want to look at a calendar? You want to look at your work schedule? You sure about this? And she looks, and she looks, and God bless her honesty and her courage, because from that witness stand, she said, you know something? I have to correct myself. I didn't see him on the 20th. I saw him on the 17th. I saw him on the 17th. They had her in the loop of this cobbled together story for a while, but she broke away right on the witness stand and told you the truth. And the truth that she told you matched what Sergeant Clyde Joseph said. Remember, Clyde Joseph said, hey, went up to this woman and she said, yeah, I saw him on Wednesday. The reason I bring that up, among other things, is to suggest to you that it is unfair for the district attorney's office to sneer at the fact that Levi mixed up his days during his deposition 2 years after the event, and before any criminal charges had been filed, and before he had any of this stuff to refresh his memory, that he said, no, I wasn't in Los Lunas on Friday. And he told you, I meant later on, when he got all of this stuff, and he got all of these records, and he was able to put things in context, realized that, yeah, I was in Los Lunas on Saturday, or I was in Los Lunas on Friday. And before, he said that he wasn't in Los Lunas on Friday because he was thinking of Saturday. And he said he didn't have a calendar. And Mr. McKay would chortle that, he doesn't have a calendar, that's his excuse. Well, what about Jeanne Moreau, your own witness, man, who got up on direct examination and said what you wanted her to say until she got a calendar? And let's talk about Sergeant Clyde Joseph. Sergeant Clyde Joseph was one solid man. You remember him. He was kind of like been there for a good long time, sergeant for the Valencia County Police Department. He wasn't a young buck trying to make names, trying to create sensations, trying to make a really big hullabaloo, whoop-de-doo case. No, he's just a good, honest cop. And he said that when Levi got there, Levi never mentioned suicide. Never said, because Aaron Jones, remember Aaron Jones was telling every one of these witnesses, there's something wrong with that Levi. All he says is suicide, suicide, suicide. It's pretty funny, he never used the word once, but Levi didn't mention the word suicide with Clyde Joseph, not once. He didn't one time say he was a cop. And he didn't come home in cop outfit either. He came home in jeans and a sweater, because that's what he wore from Deborah Romero's house. Didn't say he was a cop. DA's office wants you to be the thin blue line. Oh, corruption, culture of corruption of the police. Sergeant Clyde Joseph gets there. What does he do? He sees Levi looking distraught, crying on his knees, saying why. Sergeant Clyde Joseph tells you that Levi never saw him, didn't notice him for the longest time. Sergeant Joseph was standing in the doorway just looking at Levi. Levi isn't even aware of his presence. Clyde Joseph tells you that under the circumstances, meaning the circumstances of walking in on a dead wife, was there anything unusual or inappropriate about the scene or about Levi Chavez? No. And then, this is the nugget I want you to take with you, because once again, it shows the fallacy of the state. The state is trying to have you sneer like it sneers about Levi's contention that he turned the lights on. Oh, he walked in the house. In none of these statements where he talked to police did he ever say he turned the light on. Well, what? That's supposed to be some big deal? I don't know. We didn't know it was a big deal. We didn't know it was a big deal until Aaron Jones comes in with his manufactured stuff, and we're going to get to that. But what does Clyde Joseph say? And I sure hope you took notes, at least some of you, about this, because I asked a very non-leading question. In fact, I didn't even ask him. I said, I didn't even bring up lights. I said, and I hope you remember this question. This is the question I posed to Sergeant Clyde Joseph. I said, well, were you able to see blood on Tara in the dark in that room? And his answer was strong and clear. The lights were on when I first walked into that room. The lights were on when I first walked into that room. Clyde Joseph, the first cop there. So, stop your chortling, state. Now, Virginia Bateman from the FBI, what she told you was that these were really old phones, that they didn't have a lot of the sophistication, and part of the lack of sophistication means that a lot of the stuff she was trying to pull off of them were in an unsupported format or something like that. I don't remember her exact words. But basically, she told you that with the phone that Levi turned over to the police voluntarily, and the other two phones that Joseph Cordova got from, I don't know if he snatched them or what, we didn't hear anything about asking permission, but that he took from Levi's two children, those phones, he got them and turned them over to Aaron Jones, and those were all downloaded. Virginia Bateman told you that with regard to each phone, she had to use 3 different software programs. One of them was called Cellbrite, and I think one of them was called RZT or something, and another one was called something else, but that she used 3 different programs, and that some of them would get some of the information, able to capture it, and some of them would get some, but none of the programs got everything, and that there was a lot lost. And both she and the computer guy told you that, you know, when something is deleted, it goes into unallocated space. And so it's not really deleted, it's not gone, but it doesn't have an arrow pointing to exactly where it is. It's just, I don't know, floating in there somewhere. Well, she told you that we use these programs to try to extract this information, but we can't always get everything. And sometimes we can get a little bit, but on this program, well, maybe we can't get text messages. On this other program, maybe we can get incoming but not outgoing or whatever. This program, we can get videos and photographs, but we can't get texts. And so they got what they got. And she told you, and it was real clear, and I hope you all took notes on this too, that she was never, ever trying to assert that her 3 methods, even combined, were all encompassing and able to pull everything off the phones. And so what you got, you got. But I'm going to show you, and I'm going to tell you something, and it may have to wait until after lunch, probably will. I'm going to show you that they got more texts than the DA wants you to believe in their little thinking inside the box PowerPoint presentation. There's more. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'm outside the box, and we're going to talk about the stuff outside the box. Bateman also told you that these phones were old and that there was no spyware. Because you see, the state in all the years since 2007, has been scrambling to try to find a way to prove an innocent man guilty. And back in time, their theory was, Levi Chavez installed some kind of secret stuff on the phones so that he could send messages and make it look like it was coming from Tara's phone. That was the theory. You didn't hear it in here because they abandoned that theory before we went to court. But there were a lot of theories that you heard here that they even abandoned during the middle of trial, and we'll talk about those too. But anyhow, that's why we got Virginia Bateman to say that there was no spyware, because we had to defend against that. Because Levi and I didn't know what kind of moving target we had to deal with the DA's office and the investigators changing motives left and right, changing means and manners of committing this thing left and right. We had to be prepared to deal with all of it. Now, what lawyers tell you isn't evidence, but I'll tell you that both sides had more than 20,000 pages of documents and materials and things that don't even include videos and photographs and all that kind of stuff. That's what 7 or 6 or however many years of investigation will produce. Tens of thousands of pages with innumerable different wild theories. So, no spyware or cloneware. We didn't end up having to be important, but just in case that came back into the DA's pantheon of made up motives and made up means and methods, it was there for you. The computer guy. The DA has this big, bold letters that thousands of files were deleted. Well, you know, I don't know that much about computers. I know that they say that if your computer's running slow for a troubleshooting thing, you might try deleting all your temporary internet files, or you might try deleting these things on your desktop. Sometimes there's these programs that just keep running and running in the background even though you're not using them. Well, delete them. And by the way, all this deleted stuff as though it were nefarious. Brookerson also told you about all these deleted photographs of women's shoes. Whatever, catalog for children's clothing. Looking up astrological sites. We know Tara had a book of astrology under her bed the night she died. Astrology. All kinds of innocuous stuff. All kinds of innocuous stuff. So now, if the state had come in here and was able to show you that Levi or someone with laser-like precision was able to delete only the stuff that would implicate him in a crime, then maybe that would mean something. But when you hit a damn button and everything gets deleted because you want to get your computer working better, and you end up deleting stuff that the state wants to put, evil touches on, but then also deleted is all kinds of, ads for women's pumps at Sears or something. That dog don't hunt. I want to talk very briefly because I know the judge is about to stop me. Are you about to stop me?
Why don't we stop her?
Okay, we'll stop now.
Folks, be back at 1:15 and we'll get started between 1:15 and 1:30.
All right.
We'll be in recess.
Thank you.